This is the Franchise Consultant Podcast. Each Monday, we release a new episode hosted by Adam Goldman. Adam has over 10 years of franchising experience, and he's worked hard to realize his dreams by being his own boss. His experience will help you to become a better business owner and franchisee so that you can live your best life and control your destiny. This is the Franchise Consultant Podcast, and this is Adam Goldman.
Well, I'm so excited. This is the Franchise Consultant Podcast. I'm so excited today to talk to Jeremy Jenson, a good friend and someone that is the CEO of Encore Search Partners. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Excellent. Thank you for having me, Adam.
So the reason why I wanted to have you on, besides being a huge LinkedIn presence and someone that I really admire in business, is I really wanted to get a sense from you about what your thought was about what's going on in the marketplace right now for people that are either furloughed or worried about being laid off. And what do you see out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've got an interesting take on, everything that's going on right now. As you mentioned, I'm the owner of Encore Search Partners. We are a headhunting firm, right? And so companies turn to us whenever they've got open jobs that they're having trouble to fill. And so we actually like very, very low unemployment. And unfortunately, that's not what we're experiencing right now in the market. I think I recently heard that it's quickly approaching about 20 million Americans that want to be employed are actually unemployed right now. And so, obviously a big bulk of that is going to be the retail and hospitality sectors because, government mandates around those individuals and those facilities not being able to be open right now. But what we're seeing, because America's kind of been shut down for 4 weeks, that even large energy, industrial, and manufacturing companies are starting to lay people off now as well. And so, yeah, it's certainly not a very great time to be in the recruitment space, but I'll be happy to answer any questions or provide any insight specifically if there's anything that you want me to reference right now, Adam.
So I guess my question is, you deal a lot with people that are job seekers. And if you could just comment a little bit about what you're seeing right now in the marketplace and if any advice, if any you might have for people that are kind of in a space where they were used to making a good salary and now they're just kind of not in that situation anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would like to do is just to kind of shed some insight into what we saw here in Texas back in 2014, 15, and 16, because, I think that was somewhat of a leading indicator of what we might be able to expect here in 2020 and 2021. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Individuals come to us, at least people in our industry, whenever they're looking to move to another organization. And unfortunately, what we're experiencing right now with sub $20 oil, coupled with coronavirus, coupled with an election year, is, companies don't really have an appetite to carry overhead. Obviously with the volatility in the stock market as well, that's hurting their shareholders, and their shareholders want to see a return on their investment and see profitable organizations, right? And so what we're seeing specifically here in Texas is mass layoffs, individuals looking for job opportunities. And the simple fact is if your company is laying off right now, there's a really, really high probability that companies like yours across the street are going to be laying off as well. So, my advice to those folks that are getting severance packages and getting laid off is you guys really need to be prepared for at least 12 months before things normalize. And the simple truth is, and the hard truth rather, is that the individuals with 20 plus years of experience that have put in kind of those loyal years and that sweat equity with these companies, they need to realize that they're probably getting paid 20 to 30% more than their counterparts that are willing to do these jobs, with 5 years of experience or 7 years of experience, right? And so what's going to happen is, these individuals that are getting laid off right now, hopefully they're being financially taken care of by their employers, right? When we talk about a severance package or somewhat of a golden umbrella as it relates to their benefits and things of that nature, a golden parachute rather. But when those companies start hiring back, in my experience back in 2015 and 2016, it's the earlier career people that have more of a maybe a 15 or 20 or 30 year trajectory in their career left, that companies are going to be motivated to bring on first. Again, because they're at the lower compensation level, and then they feel like they've got more of a runway as it relates to longevity in their career remaining. And for whatever reason, I think there's a stigma related to employers thinking that earlier career talent is going to be a little bit more technology savvy and have the ability to work remotely and things of that nature. And so if you're a 20, 25, 30-year veteran that's getting laid off, again, I think there's going to be at least a 12-month lag before employers really start to take a close look at bringing you on board. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I mean, any advice for these people, these veterans, they're at home and they want to stay relevant, and it might be 12 months before they would be able to get on board, and they might even unfortunately have to accept a lower salary than they were used to before. What can they do to keep themselves relevant and active and just kind of prepare themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can kind of, share, my experience. So early in my career, whenever I wasn't let go, but I parted ways from my employer, and as I was, evaluating things to do, the biggest thing that I bet on was myself, right? And so I started my first company at 25 years old. Now I'm 36 on the second company, and fortunately we've had a lot of success because of implementing processes and systems and accountability. But, what I would encourage these folks that may have, $500,000 in their 401k or maybe even excess in that, and have, somewhat of a runway, if maybe they're unemployed for 6 months, a year, 18 months, I would encourage those folks to invest in themselves. And that could be done in a variety of different ways. It could be done in maybe educating yourself in a really high demand industry. So maybe like, cybersecurity, or as we've all seen, over the last few months, there's been a massive need for people in the medical profession, right? But that's one way to invest in yourself, is to get an education in an industry that we've deemed as very, very essential, right? Or the second option is invest in yourself by starting a business. I was a young entrepreneur that experienced some early success and has created a lot of financial freedom for myself. And again, it wasn't until we implemented those processes and systems and accountability to where, I was given the opportunity to actually work far less hours because we systematized the business, right? And so I think that's what I would advise people that may have somewhat of a nest egg before you burn through that over the next 12 months. And you're maybe left with much fewer options, and then you're making decisions out of desperation. I would encourage you guys to look at either starting a business or getting educated in a field where there even is a massive demand right now. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. That's great advice, Jeremy. I really appreciate that, and I think the listeners appreciate that as well. How were you able, besides the system, we know that you're a very, very driven guy, but I'm seeing right here that in 6 years, you've grown to be the second largest privately held executive search firm in Houston. Besides systems and processes, there must have been some grit involved as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the grit was required in the early years because you're creating a brand that nobody knows about. And so there certainly was some hustle related to making the cold calls and going to the networking events and educating people on what it is that you did. now it's become so systematized to where if I put $1 in, I'll get $2 out within 6 months, right? And so that's what really incentivizes us to hire producers and really streamline our training and recruitment efforts and things of that nature, to where, even your business, I know, Adam, in order to eliminate those first 3 or 4 years where we had to go and educate people on what it is that we did, and it might make sense to take a look at starting a franchise where there already was somewhat of a known commodity, right? And so, what I would encourage your listeners to do would to be looking at those industries that are still operating right now, right? And so whether it could be I don't know. This is much more up your alley, right? But businesses related to healthcare or other industries that are still operating and are experiencing actually increased profits in the face of a pandemic. And so I think it might be wise, even for myself, in order to diversify our revenue stream, to take a look at fast tracking those marketing years, to where if maybe we step into a brand that's somewhat of a known commodity, we can get off the ground much, much quicker. And so hopefully that long elaboratory answer made sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to go back and add some color to what you said earlier about the kind of situation people are facing right now. I really liked your story. You told me about someone a couple of years ago that was forced to potentially accept a salary that was lower. And I also liked your post recently on LinkedIn about a lawyer. You can just elaborate on that, about the one that was called and asked to take a pay.
Yeah. So, what we predominantly do is we focus on recruiting people that make over $150,000 a year on their base salary. And so that lends us to certain industries like recruiting attorneys and wealth advisors and high-level executives and technical engineers. But man, I was really surprised to get a phone call last Thursday from an attorney in Chicago who we had been drip marketing on for quite some time. And she just replied to an email, asked for a phone call. I think the phone call was at about 7:45 in the morning, and she was livid. Apparently what had happened was her law firm was experiencing some financial troubles, right? I would imagine that a lot of their clients were not paying their bills or they were potentially even going out of business. And then they certainly didn't have a need for, corporate transactions and things of that nature. And so in order to weather the storm, this law firm decided not to do a layoff, but rather cut the salaries of all their people, cut them in half. Now, I think if they would have had that conversation with people face to face, it probably would have come over okay. But unfortunately, they didn't inform anybody. Whenever it came time for this attorney to get her direct deposit that Thursday, just half of it deposited. And so I can imagine HR or the managing partners were fielding a ton of replies from their employees. And so she called me livid. Obviously, this is an individual who is accustomed to a $500,000 salary going down to $250,000. I'd be willing to bet she could still pay her bills. But this was a time where this firm actually pissed her off so bad, she was willing to call a headhunter to confidentially explore her options with other firms. And so I think a lot of companies are going to lose good talent right now, good profitable talent, just because they're mismanaging this entire COVID situation.
And talk to me a little bit about your company's culture, because it sounds like you've won awards for one of the top companies in Houston area. What separates you from a culture perspective, and what can potential entrepreneurs learn about that culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's pretty tough to define the word culture. The way that I would define it is it's our core values. And so when you say, what is our culture? What I can say is we're all 100% on the same page, because we eat, sleep, and breathe our core values all the way before people even interview with us. during the interview, during training, and then obviously we coach and sometimes even terminate to the core values. And so when someone says, "What is your culture?" I guess the way that I would respond with that is I'll just list off the 6 core values. And so the number one related to our firm in particular, again, the culture for us and the culture for Exxon or the culture from Microsoft could be very, very different. Doesn't mean one's right. Doesn't mean that one's wrong. It's just this is the culture. So, everybody's on the same page and, everybody knew exactly what they were getting into whenever they accepted the offer, right? But our 6 core values is 6 words. Number 1 is excellence. Number 2 is responsiveness. Number 3 is gratitude. 4 is coachability. 5 is meticulousness. And number 6 is competitiveness. And so that's what really defines our culture. And I think the reason why we win the awards and do get that recognition is, number 1, we actually apply for it. But number 2, it's because everybody's on the same page. There's no bad apple that's messing with the direction that everybody is essentially rowing that boat, right? And so when everyone's on the same page, it really becomes a very profitable and fun place to work. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you for sharing that. And look, I think that out of all the people I know, you're probably one of the people that's most savvy at marketing. And so I guess my question for you is, I have a lot of people that are listening to this that are potentially thinking about investing in a business. And everyone knows that lead generation is so important. It doesn't matter if you're in the business of a home service or in recruiting. What kind of advice do you have for someone that's looking to start a business and they're looking to market their business? No one knows who they are.
Yeah. So first off, I'll tell you, start a business where there is massive demand already. Okay. That's the biggest piece of advice that I can give you today. So don't start a business because you love it or you're great at it. If nobody wants to buy, if they're not raising their hand saying, "Man, I would need this service right now," don't even think about it. Right. And I think that's a common misconception of why people should start businesses. Okay. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we billed about $4 million in revenue by recruiting for oil and gas companies. Okay. It was a very profitable component to our business. Well, guess what? I completely shut that part of our business down because it wasn't a good business to be in over the last 30 days. I took all of those recruiters and now they're calling wealth advisors, experienced financial advisors. And so that is what I've deemed as there's still a massive demand for these people. I'm not going to continue to throw good money at bad money just because it was something that we've always done, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
And so I would say that it becomes very, very easy to spend marketing dollars on a business whenever your conversion rate is extremely high. Okay. And so, whenever we look at what businesses to be in right now, I'll tell you, my friends that have medical testing companies or contract staffing for nurses or sanitation businesses or cleaning businesses, these guys are making money hand over fist right now. And so these are the types of businesses that I would consider starting today, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so I know with my network and I know with my appetite to spend marketing dollars through social media or pay-per-click advertising or impression marketing on search engines, I know that if I start a business in an environment where there is demand, I'm going to be successful. Not because of me, but because of the thought and evaluation that goes through the discovery process on what that business should be.
Well, Jeremy, this is great information, both about you and your business and anything that people are dealing with that are dealing with this crisis in general. I always like to have my guests to tell the audience how people can get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you and what that contact information is. Could you please share that with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of me is always on LinkedIn. My name is Jeremy Jenson. That's Jenson. I'm the CEO and founder of Encore Search Partners. And I have a really cool rule of thumb that I make sure that all of my employees abide to as well. But anybody that sends me a message they 100% of the time get a reply. It could be good, bad, or indifferent, but you're definitely going to get a reply. And so I would say that if you want to reach out, if you have any questions, if you want any insights, it's always best to direct message me on LinkedIn, and be happy to help you from there. Jeremy Jenson.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Great chatting with you as always. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Wish you guys the most success.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Consultant Podcast. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a rating, and leave a comment on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Explore great resources on our website, FranchiseCoach.net. And if you'd like more content regularly, follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook. And hey, be sure to listen next time so you're able to realize your dreams.